The October wind came down from the Smoky Mountains with a bite that promised the first frost, cutting through the valley where the small town of Millbrook Ridge clung to existence like a barnacle on a ship long past its sailing days. The air smelled of pine needles, wood smoke, and the particular clarity that comes with elevation. Crisp, clean, and unforgiving. It was the kind of cold that demanded respect, that reminded a man he was small and the mountains were eternal. Jake Reeves stood on the sagging porch of the Cedar Creek cabin, a rental so far off the beaten path that the GPS had given up 2 miles back, forcing him to navigate by instinct and a hand-drawn map from the property manager. He wore a faded flannel shirt over a thermal Henley, jeans that had seen better days, and boots that bore the scars of a dozen deployments. His hands, calloused and scarred, gripped a chipped ceramic mug filled with black coffee that had gone cold in the mountain air. He didn't notice the cold. He noticed everything else. The way the aspens at the tree line shivered in synchronized waves. The distant sound of a raven's call, 3 short bursts. Territorial, not alarmed. The absence of human noise, blessed and complete, save for the occasional rumble of a logging truck on the highway 5 miles down the mountain. This was why he'd come. The silence. Jake was 32 years old, but his eyes belonged to someone much older, the kind of eyes that had seen too much and forgotten too little. He was built like a middleweight fighter, not the biggest man in any room, but dense with coiled muscle and the kind of economy of movement that spoke of thousands of hours of training. His dark hair was cut military short, his jaw covered with 3 days of stubble that couldn't hide the hard line of his mouth. He was a Navy SEAL on mandatory psychiatric leave, a phrase that made his jaw clench every time he thought about it. The Navy didn't call it that, of course. They called it resiliency training or operational reset, bureaucratic language designed to soften the reality. He'd been in the game too long, seen too many brothers in flag-draped boxes, pulled too many triggers, and made too many calls that kept him awake at ZO 300 staring at the ceiling. The last mission, the one he didn't talk about, the one that sat in his chest like a stone, had been the final straw. Command had noticed the micro-hesitations, the 1,000-yard stare that lingered too long, the way his hands shook when he thought no one was watching. They'd grounded him, ordered him stateside, and prescribed distance from operational tempo. So here he was, in the mountains, trying to remember what peace felt like. A wet nose nudged his hand, breaking his reverie. Jake looked down at Titan, his Belgian Malinois, and felt the tension in his shoulders ease fractionally. Titan was 75 pounds of muscle, intelligence, and barely contained energy. His tan and black coat thick with the approach of winter. The dog's dark eyes were locked on Jake's face, reading his handler with the precision of a year spent in Kandahar detecting IEDs and another 2 years as a personal protection detail. Titan wasn't just a dog. He was a brother, a partner who had saved Jake's life in Helmand Province when an insurgent had gotten past the perimeter. The dog had taken a bullet meant for Jake, survived surgery in a field hospital, and earned his retirement with honors. When Jake had been ordered stateside, he'd pulled every favor, called in every debt to bring Titan with him. "Yeah, buddy," Jake murmured, crouching down to scratch behind Titan's alert ears. "I know. I'm in my head again." Titan's tail gave a single, efficient wag. Not the frantic joy of a pet, but the controlled acknowledgement of a professional receiving confirmation. The dog leaned his weight into Jake's leg, a grounding pressure that therapists called deep pressure therapy, and Jake called the only thing that works. Jake stood, draining the last of his cold coffee. "Come on, let's go see what passes for civilization around here." The two of them climbed into Jake's battered Jeep Wrangler, a vehicle held together by duct tape, determination, and spite. The engine turned over with a reluctant growl, and they headed down the winding mountain road toward town. Millbrook Ridge wasn't much. A single main street with a hardware store, a post office, a gas station, and the Sunrise Diner, a squat building with faded yellow paint and a neon sign that flickered erratically. The parking lot held 3 pickup trucks and a sheriff's cruiser, its occupant visible through the window, a heavy-set man with a badge that caught the light. Jake parked at the far end of the lot, a habit born of always wanting an exit route. He cracked the windows for Titan, who settled onto the passenger seat with the patience of a professional. "On guard," Jake said quietly, the command unnecessary but ritualistic. Titan's ears swiveled forward, scanning the environment. His message was clear. "I've got Overwatch." Jake pushed through the diner's door, the bell above it chiming with a cheerful brass note that felt out of place in his current mental landscape. The interior smelled of bacon grease, coffee, and decades of absorbed conversation. A handful of locals sat in booths, their faces weathered and familiar with one another, offering Jake the polite nod reserved for strangers who weren't causing trouble. He took a corner booth with a clear view of both the entrance and the kitchen pass through. Another habit he couldn't shake. The vinyl seat was cracked but clean, the formica table worn smooth by countless elbows. And then she appeared. Emma Lawson moved through the Sunrise Diner with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd worked the floor for years, balancing a pot of coffee in one hand and a stack of menus in the other. She was 28, with auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail that revealed a face marked by exhaustion and something harder to define. A wariness that sat in the tightness around her eyes and the way she scanned each customer as they entered, as if cataloging threats. She wore the diner's standard uniform, a pale blue dress with white trim, sensible sneakers, and a name tag that read Emma in cheerful script that felt like a lie. There was a time when that name tag had meant something simple. A waitress in a small town, working to support her 4-year-old daughter, dreaming of saving enough to maybe take some online classes or fix the transmission in her dying Honda. That was before she'd stayed late to close up, before she'd taken the trash to the dumpster in the alley, before she'd seen Marcus Vance, the nephew of crime boss Vincent Vance, execute a rival drug dealer with 2 shots to the back of the head in the alley behind the diner. Before she'd testified, Emma had done what she thought was right. She'd called 911, given a statement, and 6 months ago she'd sat in a federal courtroom and pointed at Marcus Vance and said, "That's him. I saw him do it." Marcus was serving 25 to life in a maximum security facility 3 states away. But Vincent Vance, the uncle, the crime lord who ran operations from the Tennessee border to the Carolina coast, was still free. And men like Vincent Vance didn't forgive. They didn't forget. They waited. The FBI had offered her witness protection, a new name, a new town, a new life for her and her daughter Sophie. But Emma's mother was dying of cancer in the Millbrook Ridge Hospice facility, and Emma wouldn't abandon her in her final months. So she'd refused protection, signed a waiver, and stayed. She told herself she was being careful. She varied her routes home. She checked her locks obsessively. She kept Sophie at her mother's house on nights she worked late, just in case. But no amount of caution could erase the cold knot of dread that lived in her stomach. the certainty that someday someone would come. Emma approached Jake's table, forcing her customer service smile into place despite the bone-deep fatigue. "Evening," she said, her voice pleasant but automatic. "Coffee to start?" Jake looked up, and for a moment their eyes met. Emma saw something flicker in his expression. Recognition, not of her specifically, but of the look she wore. The look of someone carrying weight. "Please," Jake said, his voice a low rumble that carried the texture of gravel. "Black, and a menu, if you've got one." Emma poured the coffee, noting the steadiness of his hands, the way he'd positioned himself in the booth to watch the room, the alertness beneath his casual posture. Military, she thought. She'd seen enough veterans pass through Millbrook Ridge to recognize the signs. "Menu's right here," she said, sliding a laminated sheet across the table. "Kitchen closes in an hour, but Sam can make just about anything on there. If you're looking for a recommendation, the meatloaf's good. The chili's better." Jake's mouth quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "I'll take the chili. Thanks." Emma nodded, scribbling the order on her pad. As she turned to leave, she felt his eyes on her. Not in the predatory way she'd learned to detect, but in the assessing way of someone trained to read people. It made her self-conscious, aware of the dark circles under her eyes that concealer couldn't quite hide, the tremor in her hands when she thought no one was looking. She pushed through the swinging kitchen door, calling out Jake's order to Sam, the 60-year-old line cook who'd been working at the Sunrise since Carter was president. Sam grunted acknowledgement, already ladling chili into a bowl. Emma leaned against the stainless steel counter, pressing the heels of her hands against her eyes. She was so tired. Tired of looking over her shoulder, tired of the nightmares where Marcus Vance's face morphed into his uncle's, both of them pointing guns at Sophie. Tired of pretending everything was fine. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. "You okay, Emma?" Sam asked, concern creasing his weathered face. Emma dropped her hands and manufactured a smile. "Yeah, Sam, just a long shift. I'm good." She wasn't good, but she was standing. For now, that had to be enough. She picked up Jake's bowl of chili, added a side of cornbread and a napkin-wrapped bundle of silverware, and pushed back through the door into the dining room. The bell above the entrance chimed again. Emma's head snapped toward the sound, her heart rate spiking in the instinctive way it had for 6 months, every time a door opened unexpectedly. It was just Old Man Henderson, coming in for his nightly slice of pie and decaf. Emma exhaled, forcing her pulse to slow, and delivered Jake's order with hands that only shook slightly. She didn't know that in 6 hours the bell would chime again. And this time, it wouldn't be a neighbor. The temperature dropped another 5 degrees as true night settled over Millbrook Ridge. The diner's fluorescent lights became the only bright point on Main Street, a beacon in the gathering dark. Most of the dinner crowd had filtered out, leaving only Jake in his corner booth, methodically working through his second bowl of chili, and Sheriff Dale Crenshaw, still parked in his booth near the register, nursing his 4th cup of coffee and working on a crossword puzzle he'd never finish. Crenshaw was a fixture in Millbrook Ridge, a man whose badge had been pinned to his chest for 23 years. He was 56, overweight in the way of men who spent more time in cruisers than on foot, with a face that had once been handsome but had softened into jowly complacency. His uniform was always immaculate, his boots polished, his smile easy, He was also on Vincent Vance's payroll, though only 3 people knew it. Crenshaw himself, Vincent Vance, and the accountant who made the monthly deposits into an offshore account disguised as consulting fees. Crenshaw had convinced himself he wasn't really corrupt. He didn't deal drugs. He didn't hurt people. He just looked the other way when certain shipments came through the county. He made sure certain traffic stops didn't result in searches. He ensured that certain witnesses didn't get the protection they requested. Like Emma Lawson. When Emma had asked for a patrol car to swing by her apartment at night, Crenshaw had smiled sympathetically and explained budget cuts. When she'd reported a strange car following her, he'd filed the report and done nothing. When the FBI had contacted him about coordinating local protection, he'd assured them Emma was safe and then called Vincent Vance within the hour. Tonight, Crenshaw was nervous. Vincent had made contact 2 days ago. The message had been simple. The waitress problem needs to be resolved tonight. Make sure you're visible at the diner, then find a reason to leave. 10 minutes, that's all we need. Crenshaw had protested weakly. She's just a girl, Vincent. She's got a kid. Vincent's response had been colder than the mountain wind. She put my nephew in prison. She knew the consequences. Don't develop a conscience now, Dale. It's too late for that. So here Crenshaw sat, watching Emma refill the stranger's coffee, watching the clock tick toward 10 p.m., watching the door, and hating himself just enough to feel it, but not enough to stop it. At 9:47 p.m., the bell chimed. The temperature in the diner seemed to drop, though the door had closed quickly behind the man who entered. He was tall and lean, wearing a dark canvas jacket despite the cold, his hands in his pockets, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He moved with a deliberate slowness, scanning the diner with eyes that missed nothing. This was Luca Moretti. Though he had 17 different names on 17 different driver's licenses, he was a professional, a cleaner, the kind of man who specialized in problems that needed permanent solutions. Vincent Vance paid him $25,000 per job, half up front, half on confirmation. Luca had been watching Emma Lawson for 3 days. He knew her schedule, her route home, where her daughter stayed, where her dying mother was receiving hospice care. He knew she closed the diner alone on Friday nights when Sam left at 9:30. He knew the security camera in the parking lot had been broken for 2 weeks, and the town couldn't afford to fix it. He knew that Sheriff Crenshaw would leave in exactly 8 minutes. Luca slid into a booth near the door, positioning himself with his back to the wall, his right hand still in his jacket pocket where it rested on the grip of a suppressed Glock 19. He wasn't worried about the old sheriff. He was mildly curious about the man in the corner booth. Military bearing, alert posture, potential, complication, but not concerned. Civilians didn't intervene in executions. They froze. They testified later, traumatized and useless. Emma approached with a menu and her professional smile, but something in Luca's stillness made her pause 3 feet from the table. Her instincts, honed by 6 months of hypervigilance, screamed wrong. "Can I get you something?" she asked, her voice steady despite the ice spreading through her veins. Luca looked up at her. His eyes were flat, emotionless, the eyes of a shark. "Coffee," he said. "I'll wait for it here." Emma nodded, backing away instead of turning, a prey animal that had just recognized a predator. She moved to the coffee station, her hands shaking as she poured, her mind racing. "It's nothing. He's just a customer. You're paranoid." But she wasn't paranoid. She'd been right to be afraid. At 9:55 p.m., Sheriff Crenshaw's radio crackled to life. The voice was one of his deputies, reporting a possible drunk driver on Route 9, requesting backup. It was staged, a call Crenshaw had arranged himself, but he played his part well. "Copy that," Crenshaw said into the radio, standing and stretching. He caught Emma's eye and smiled apologetically. "Duty calls, sweetheart. Tell Sam I'll settle up tomorrow." Emma wanted to scream, "Don't leave me," but she just nodded mutely. Crenshaw walked out, the bell chiming cheerfully behind him. His cruiser pulled out of the parking lot, taillights disappearing down Main Street. The diner was now empty except for 3 people: Emma, Jake Reeves, and the man who had been sent to kill her. Emma carried the coffee to Luca's table with trembling hands. As she set the cup down, he looked up at her again, and this time he smiled, a cold, mechanical expression that never reached his eyes. "Emma Lawson," he said softly. Not a question, a confirmation. Emma's blood turned to ice. Luca's hand came out of his pocket. In it was the Glock, the suppressor making it look alien and wrong, pointed directly at her stomach. "Vincent Vance sends his regards," Luca said. "Sit down. If you scream, I'll shoot you, and then I'll go visit Sophie at 247 Maple Street. Do you understand?" Emma couldn't breathe. The world narrowed to the black circle of the gun's muzzle. She nodded, sinking into the booth across from him, her mind blank with terror. In the corner booth, Jake Reeves set down his spoon with careful precision. His eyes were locked on the man with the gun. And outside in the Jeep, Titan had just stood up in the passenger seat, his hackles rising, a low growl rumbling in his chest. The storm was about to break. Time fractured into crystalline shards, each second stretching into an eternity of choices and consequences. Emma Lawson sat frozen across from her executioner, the warmth draining from her body as if someone had opened a valve. The gun in Luca Moretti's hand was steady, unwavering, the suppressor making it look impossibly long, a black tunnel that led to permanent darkness. "Please," Emma whispered, the words scraping out of her throat like broken glass. "My daughter, she's only 4. She'll be fine," Luca interrupted, his voice clinical, detached. "Foster care isn't ideal, but she's young. She'll adapt. Children are resilient." He said it like he was discussing the weather, a mild inconvenience rather than the destruction of a life. Emma's hands gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. Her mind was screaming at her to move, to run, to fight, but her body was locked in place by the primal understanding that movement meant death. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh, unforgiving clarity. The flecks of gray in Luca's stubble, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the absolute absence of mercy in his expression. "Vincent wanted you to know why," Luca continued, adjusting his grip on the Glock fractionally. "You had a choice. You could have kept your mouth shut. Instead, you put his nephew in prison. Actions have consequences, Emma. This is yours." Through the kitchen, pass-through window, Sam was visible, his back turned as he scrubbed the industrial griddle, headphones in his ears, lost in whatever classic rock station he favored. He had no idea what was happening 15 feet away. Emma thought about screaming, but the threat against Sophie held her vocal cords in a vice. "Stand up slowly," Luca ordered. "We're going to walk to the back door together. You're going to tell Sam you're taking the trash out. Then we're going to have a conversation in the alley, and this will all be over. Quick, clean, or..." He tilted his head fractionally toward the window. "I can do it here, and Sam becomes collateral damage. Your choice." Emma felt tears burning tracks down her cheeks. She had known this moment was coming for 6 months, had played it out in her nightmares 1,000 times. But the reality was so much worse than imagination. The unfairness of it. Surviving an abusive marriage, building a life for Sophie, finding the courage to testify, only to have it end in a diner that smelled like coffee and bacon grease. She started to rise, her legs shaking, when Luca's eyes flickered past her shoulder. His expression shifted microscopically, a tightening around his mouth, a fractional narrowing of his eyes, a complication. In the corner booth, Jake Reeves was standing up. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He simply stood, and there was something in the deliberateness of the movement that commanded attention. Jake's hands were visible, empty, held loosely at his sides. His posture was relaxed, but there was a coiled energy beneath it, like a spring compressed to its limit. "Sir," Jake said, his voice calm, conversational, carrying across the empty diner, "I think you dropped something." It was absurd, transparently absurd, but it was also a signal, a disruption in the predator's plan. Luca's eyes tracked to Jake, calculating. The gun remained pointed at Emma, but Luca's attention was divided now. "Mind your business," Luca said flatly. Jake took a step forward, not aggressive, just present. Hard to do that when you're pointing a gun at someone. Luca's jaw tightened. This was the complication he'd noted earlier. The military-looking stranger who was supposed to freeze, to be a traumatized witness, not an active participant. "Last warning," Luca said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. "Sit down, or I'll put a round through her spine and then through your skull. You're not a hero. You're a statistic waiting to happen." Jake's expression didn't change. He took another step, angling slightly to put himself between Luca and the kitchen pass-through, cutting off the line of sight to Sam. "Maybe," Jake said, "but here's the thing. I've had worse days than this, much worse, and I'm really tired of watching bad people hurt good ones." Outside, through the diner's front window, movement, a shape launching itself at the glass with focused aggression. Titan had been sitting in the Jeep, monitoring through the windows as he'd been trained. He'd watched Jake stand. He'd watched the hostile's body language, the gun, the threat posture, the attention diverted. And he'd made the decision every military working dog is trained to make. His handler was in danger. The Belgian Malinois hit the diner's front door at full speed, 75 pounds of muscle and determination. The door wasn't locked. It was a small-town diner where they didn't lock doors until closing, and it flew open under Titan's assault, the brass bell clanging wildly. Titan didn't bark. He didn't growl. He exploded into the space like a missile with teeth, his focus absolute, vectoring on the man with the gun. Luca's head snapped toward the sound, his training overriding his planning. He swung the Glock away from Emma toward the threat, and that was the opening Jake needed. Jake crossed the distance in 3 strides, faster than thought, his body moving with the muscle memory of 1,000 hours of close-quarters combat training. He didn't go for the gun. Amateur mistake, too easy to lose fingers or catch a round. He went for the gunman. Jake's left hand shot out, clamping onto Luca's wrist and driving it upward and away from Emma. His right hand drove forward in a palm strike to Luca's solar plexus, a blow designed to disrupt breathing and balance. Luca was good. He twisted with the impact, preventing the full force from landing, and drove his knee up toward Jake's groin. Jake pivoted, taking the knee on his outer thigh, using the momentum to trap Luca's gun hand against the edge of the booth. the Glock discharged with a muffled thwip, the round punching through the vinyl seat and into the floor, the suppressor containing most of the sound but not all of it. Emma screamed, diving under the table, her survival instincts finally overriding her paralysis. Titan reached them a second later. The dog didn't attack randomly. He'd been trained for precision. He targeted Luca's right leg, the one bearing weight, sinking his teeth into the calf muscle with a pressure that could generate over 300 psi of bite force. Luca gasped, his leg buckling, and Jake used the moment of weakness to execute a standing armbar, hyperextending Luca's elbow while simultaneously stripping the Glock from his hand. The weapon clattered onto the linoleum. Luca, even injured, even outmatched, was a professional. He drove his free elbow backward into Jake's ribs, a hard, precise strike that connected with enough force to crack bone. Jake grunted, pain flaring white-hot through his side, but he didn't let go. Instead, he swept Luca's legs, using Titan's bite as an anchor point, and drove the assassin face first into the floor. The impact was brutal. Luca's forehead connected with the tile with a sickening crack, dazing him. Jake dropped his knee onto the small of Luca's back, pinning him, while Titan maintained his grip on the leg, growling now, a deep, resonant sound of contained aggression. "Titan, hold," Jake commanded, his voice ragged from exertion and pain. The dog adjusted his bite, not releasing but not crushing, a perfectly controlled hold that kept Luca immobilized without severing arteries. Jake grabbed Luca's right arm, wrenching it behind his back at an angle that made resistance impossible, and pressed his face against the cold tile. "Don't move," Jake said, his voice low and absolutely certain. "My dog's been very patient. Don't give him a reason to stop being patient." Through the kitchen, pass-through, Sam had finally noticed the commotion. The old cook stood frozen, a spatula in one hand, his mouth open in shock. "What in the... Emma? Emma, you okay?" Emma crawled out from under the booth, her face streaked with tears and mascara, her breath coming in hitching sobs. She looked at Jake, at Titan, at the man who'd been sent to kill her now pinned to the floor like a butterfly in a collection. "Call 911, Jake said, not looking at Sam, his focus entirely on the man beneath him. "Tell them we have an attempted murder in progress and we need state police, not local. You got that? State police." Sam fumbled for the phone behind the counter, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. Emma sank onto the floor, her back against a booth, pulling her knees to her chest. She was alive. Sophie was safe. The nightmare she'd been living for 6 months had just collided with something even more terrifying, a warrior and his dog who'd turned the tables on death itself. Jake felt the adrenaline beginning to ebb, felt the pain in his ribs sharpening from a dull ache to a stabbing insistence. Beneath him, Luca Moretti was breathing in short, sharp gasps, the fight gone out of him, replaced by the cold calculation of a man assessing his legal options. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Luca hissed through gritted teeth, blood from his split forehead, pooling on the floor. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Jake leaned down, his mouth close to Luca's ear. "I'm a Navy SEAL," he said quietly. "I've been shot at by professionals in 3 different countries. I've breached compounds guarded by men who make you look like a mall cop. And I'm having a really bad month. So no, you have no idea who you're messing with." He pressed fractionally harder on Luca's arm, eliciting a gasp of pain. "Now, shut up before my dog decides he's hungry." Titan's growl rumbled in agreement. Outside, the first hint of sirens began to wail in the distance, cutting through the mountain night. The sirens grew louder, multiple vehicles converging on the Sunrise Diner from different directions, their red and blue lights painting the surrounding buildings in alternating washes of color. Jake remained perfectly still, his knee pressing into Luca Moretti's back, his breathing controlled despite the fire radiating from his ribs. He'd taken worse hits in Ramadi, but that knowledge didn't make the pain any more pleasant. Titan held his position on Luca's leg with the patience of a professional, his ears swiveling to track the approaching vehicles. Jake could read the dog's body language like a text, alert but not alarmed, ready but not aggressive. The threat was contained. Emma had pulled herself up from the floor and now sat in the booth where Luca had held her at gunpoint, her arms wrapped around herself, staring at the scene with the glazed expression of someone processing trauma in real time. Sam had emerged from the kitchen, dish towel in hand, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The first vehicle to arrive wasn't the expected state police cruiser. It was Sheriff Dale Crenshaw's vehicle, skidding into the parking lot with theatrical urgency. Crenshaw burst through the diner door, hand on his holstered weapon, face flushed and panicked. "What in God's name?" he started, then stopped, taking in the tableau. The stranger pinning Luca to the floor, the massive dog with teeth still sunk into the assassin's leg, Emma alive and unharmed, the Glock lying on the floor just out of reach. Jake watched Crenshaw's face carefully, saw the micro-expression that flashed across it before the sheriff could control it. Not relief that a citizen was safe, but fury that a plan had failed. Interesting, Jake thought, his tactical mind cataloging the data point. "Sheriff," Jake said, his voice calm. This man entered the diner and held Emma Lawson at gunpoint. He stated he was sent by Vincent Vance to kill her as retaliation for her testimony. I intervened. The weapon is there. He jerked his chin toward the Glock. "Don't touch it. It's evidence. There's a suppressor, which makes this a federal weapons charge on top of attempted murder." Crenshaw's face went through a rapid series of calculations. "Son, I'm going to need you to let him up and step back." "No," Jake said flatly. Crenshaw's eyes widened. "Excuse me?" I said, "No, Sheriff." Jake's tone was respectful but immovable. This man is a professional killer. If I release him before proper restraints are applied, he'll exploit the opening. I've got him secured. He stays secured until someone competent takes custody." Crenshaw's face flushed darker. "Now, you listen here." "Sergeant," Jake interrupted, emphasizing his rank. "Sergeant Jake Reeves, United States Navy. And I'm not releasing a hostile until I see proper credentials and proper restraint protocols." 2 more vehicles arrived, a state police cruiser and, behind it, an unmarked sedan. The state trooper who emerged was a woman in her mid-30s, tall and fit, with short blonde hair and eyes that missed nothing. Her nameplate read Lieutenant Morrison. The man from the sedan was older, 50-ish, wearing a rumpled suit and an expression of grim competence. He held up a badge, FBI. "Special Agent Graves," the man announced, striding into the diner. "Someone want to tell me why my witness protection failure case just turned into an active crime scene?" Lieutenant Morrison moved to Jake's side, kneeling to get a clear view of Luca. "Sir, I'm going to need you to release the suspect so we can take him into custody." Jake looked at her, really looked, reading her body language, her positioning, the competence in her movements. She was the real deal. "You got cuffs? Heavy-duty restraints?" "I do." "Then cuff him while I maintain control. Once he's secured, I'll release." Jake glanced at Titan. "And I'll need confirmation you want my K9 to release. He's trained for sustained holds." Morrison nodded, pulling industrial zip-tie restraints from her belt. "Smart. Okay. On 3. 1, 2, 3. Jake maintained pressure while Morrison secured Luca's wrists behind his back, then his ankles, with the kind of thoroughness that spoke of experience with violent suspects. Only when she nodded did Jake give the command. "Titan, release." The Belgian Malinois opened his jaws and stepped back, blood on his muzzle, but didn't retreat far. He positioned himself between Jake and Luca, a living barrier, and sat at alert. Morrison and another trooper hauled Luca to his feet. The assassin's face was a mask of blood and fury, his leg bleeding steadily from the deep puncture wounds, his arm hanging at an awkward angle where Jake had hyperextended the joint. Agent Graves stepped forward, pulling out a small recording device. "Luca Moretti," he said, reading from a file on his phone. "6 outstanding warrants across 3 states. Suspected in 9 contract killings. FBI's been looking for you for 18 months. He looked at Jake. "Son, you just caught a ghost." Crenshaw had gone pale, standing near the door as if considering whether to bolt. Graves noticed. "Sheriff Crenshaw, isn't it? Interesting that you left the diner right before an assassination attempt. Interesting that you were the one who assured my office that Ms. Lawson didn't need federal protection. Very interesting. Timing." Crenshaw's mouth opened and closed like a fish. There was a call. Drunk driver." "There was no drunk driver," Lieutenant Morrison said, her voice flat. "I checked with dispatch. That call was fake, made from a burner phone." She looked at Graves. "This is starting to smell like conspiracy." Emma, who had been silent, found her voice. "He wouldn't help me," she said, her voice raw. "I asked for help, for protection. He said there was no budget. He said I was being paranoid." Graves pulled out handcuffs, not zip ties, but real steel cuffs. "Sheriff Dale Crenshaw, you're being detained for questioning in connection with conspiracy to commit murder and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent." As Graves read Crenshaw his rights, the sheriff's face crumpled. 23 years of compromises and small corruptions finally catching up to him. "I didn't know he was going to kill her," Crenshaw whimpered. "Vincent just said to make sure I wasn't around. I didn't know." "You knew enough," Graves said coldly, leading him toward the door. Jake finally stood, wincing as his ribs protested the movement. He walked to where Emma sat, still trembling, and crouched down to her eye level. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "He can't hurt you, and the people who sent him are going to have a very bad day when the FBI connects all the dots." Emma looked at him, this stranger who'd materialized out of nowhere like an avenging angel. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "You could have been killed. Why did you help me?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "Because a long time ago I took an oath to protect people who can't protect themselves," he said finally. "And just because I'm on leave doesn't mean that oath expires." Titan nudged Emma's hand with his nose, a gentle gesture so at odds with the violence he'd just inflicted. Emma let out a sound between a laugh and a sob and buried her fingers in the dog's fur. "What's his name?" she asked. "Titan. He saved my life." Jake smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "He's pretty good at that." Agent Graves returned, notebook in hand. "Sergeant Reeves, I'm going to need your full statement, and we're going to need to document your injuries. Looks like you took a hit to the ribs." "Cracked, probably," Jake agreed. "I'll live." You'll also need a rabies verification form for your dog since he bit someone. But given the circumstances, I can fast-track that. Standard protocol." Graves looked at Emma. "Ms. Lawson, we're placing you in protective custody immediately. Witness protection. No arguments this time. Vincent Vance is going down. Attempted murder of a federal witness, conspiracy, racketeering. We've been building a case for years. This gives us everything we need." Emma's eyes widened. "My daughter, my mother. We'll bring them too," Graves assured her. "New names, new location, fresh start. You testified once. You'll have to testify again. But this time, you'll do it with the full weight of federal protection, and Vincent Vance will spend the rest of his life in a concrete box." As EMTs arrived to treat Luca's wounds and evaluate Jake's ribs, Jake walked outside into the cold mountain air. Titan followed, staying close, and together they stood in the parking lot, looking up at the stars that were invisible in the cities where Jake had spent most of his adult life, but blazed with fierce clarity here in the mountains. His phone buzzed. A text from his team commander. Saw the news alert. "Millbrook Ridge? Can't take you anywhere. You okay?" Jake typed back. "Define okay. Cracked rib. Stopped a hit. Feeling useful for first time in months." The response was immediate. "That's the Jake I know. Resiliency training my ass. Call me tomorrow." Jake pocketed the phone and looked down at Titan, who was watching him with intelligent, patient eyes. "Well, boy," Jake said quietly, "guess we can't escape the noise after all." Titan's tail wagged once. Inside the diner, Emma was giving her statement to Lieutenant Morrison, her voice growing stronger with each word, reclaiming her narrative from the men who'd tried to silence it forever. The quiet was over. But maybe, Jake thought, that wasn't such a bad thing. The Sunrise Diner had transformed from a crime scene into a command center. State police had cordoned off the parking lot with yellow tape, and portable floodlights had been erected, turning night into harsh, artificial day. Forensic techs photographed the bullet hole in the booth, collected the Glock as evidence, and swabbed the blood spatter on the linoleum where Luca had hit the floor. Jake sat on the bumper of an ambulance, his shirt off, while a young EMT with nervous hands wrapped his ribs. The bruise was already blooming across his left side, a spectacular purple-black that made the medic wince. "You really should go to the hospital for x-rays," the EMT said, securing the compression wrap with medical tape. "Cracked ribs can puncture lungs if they shift wrong." "I've had worse," Jake said, which was true but didn't make it smart. "I'll be fine." "Stubborn," the EMT muttered, packing up his kit. Titan sat at Jake's feet, having been cleared by a veterinary tech who'd been called in to examine him. The dog had been swabbed for rabies verification, standard protocol when a canine bit someone, and given a clean bill of health. The puncture wounds he'd inflicted on Luca were deep but clean, textbook restraint bites from a trained military working dog. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more incredible true stories of courage and loyalty. Agent Graves approached, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee from the diner's pot. He handed one to Jake. "You did good work tonight, Sergeant. Professional, controlled, minimized casualties. Your training shows." Jake accepted the coffee, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. "Wasn't planning on playing hero. I was just trying to eat chili in peace." Graves smiled grimly. "Funny how plans work out." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through notes. "Luca Moretti's singing. Not much. He's too smart for a full confession. But he's negotiating. He wants a deal. protection from Vincent Vance in exchange for testimony. Will you give it to him? Depends what he offers. But here's what you need to know. Moretti confirmed that Sheriff Crenshaw was on Vance's payroll. Has been for years. We're looking at a corruption network that goes beyond one small-town sheriff. State prosecutors, maybe a judge, definitely local law enforcement in 3 counties. This is bigger than we thought. Jake sipped his coffee, processing. So, Emma testifying against Marcus Vance wasn't just about one murder. She opened a door. Exactly. Marcus was sloppy, got caught by a brave witness. But his uncle Vincent has been running a criminal empire for 2 decades, protected by bought and paid for officials who make sure evidence disappears and witnesses get scared. Graves looked toward the diner, where Emma was visible through the window, talking with Lieutenant Morrison. Emma didn't back down. That makes her dangerous to them, worth killing. And now she's leverage. Vincent knows we have Moretti, which means we have proof of the contract. He'll know Crenshaw's cooperating to save his own skin. The whole network is compromised. Vincent has 2 choices: run or fight. Jake's jaw tightened. Men like Vincent don't run. No, Graves agreed. They eliminate threats, which means Emma is still in danger until Vincent is in custody. He looked at Jake. I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. We're taking Emma into protective custody tonight. Witness protection takes time to arrange. New identities, relocation, takes weeks to do properly. In the meantime, she needs a safe house, off the books, somewhere Vincent's network can't reach. You have FBI safe houses. We do, but Vincent has compromised law enforcement before. I don't know how deep this goes. What I need is someone who's not in the system. Someone tactical, trained, who can keep a witness alive in a hostile environment. Graves met Jake's eyes. I need you. Jake was quiet for a long moment. I'm on medical leave. Ordered rest, ordered distance from operational tempo. You're asking me to do the exact opposite. I'm asking you to finish what you started, Graves said. You saved her life tonight. But if you walk away now, Vincent will send someone else. And next time, she might not be so lucky. Jake looked at Titan, who was watching him with intelligent eyes, reading his handler's stress levels. The dog had been his anchor, his therapy, his reason to stay grounded. Taking on a protection detail meant diving back into the chaos he'd been ordered to escape. But Emma's face, terrified, betrayed by the system that should have protected her, kept flashing in his mind. And the oath he'd referenced earlier wasn't just words, it was marrow deep. How long? Jake asked. 72 hours, maybe 4 days, just until we can get her officially processed into witness protection and find Vincent. After that, she's our responsibility. Jake stood, pulling his thermal Henley back on carefully, every movement reminding him of his cracked rib. I'll need logistical support, supplies, communications, medical kit, and she'll need to follow orders without question. I can't protect someone who fights me on tactics. Done. I'll have everything delivered to your location within 2 hours. Jake walked back toward the diner. Emma was standing now, being fitted with a thin bulletproof vest under her jacket by Lieutenant Morrison. Standard protocol for endangered witnesses. When she saw Jake approaching, her expression shifted from exhausted fear to something like cautious hope. Emma, Jake said gently, can we talk? They stepped outside, away from the chaos, into the cold mountain air. Titan followed, positioning himself between Emma and the parking lot entrance. Protective posture, automatic. Agent Graves told me you're going into witness protection, Jake began. Emma nodded, pulling her jacket tighter. New name, new town, new life. Me, Sophie, and my mom. They're picking them up right now, bringing them to a federal facility. Her voice cracked. I'm grateful. I am. But I'm also so tired of running, of being afraid. I know, Jake said, and I can't promise you won't be afraid, but I can promise you this. For the next few days until the FBI has everything in place, you won't be alone. I'm trained for this. My dog is trained for this. We're going to keep you safe. Emma looked up at him, searching his face. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Jake thought about the question, about the brothers he'd lost in Helmand, about the civilians he'd failed to save in Ramadi, about the weight that pressed on his chest at 3 a.m. when the silence was too loud. Because you did the right thing, he said finally. You testified even though you knew it was dangerous. You didn't run when you could have because you wouldn't abandon your mother. You're brave in the way that matters, not reckless but principled. People like you deserve protection, and people like me. He trailed off, searching for words. People like me need to protect people like you. It's what gives the violence meaning. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. Okay, she said. Okay, tell me what to do. Jake outlined the plan. They'd leave within the hour, before news of the arrest spread through Vincent's network. They'd go to the Cedar Creek cabin, isolated, defensible, off-grid. Emma would stay inside, away from windows. Jake would establish a perimeter. Titan would patrol. No phones, no social media, no contact with anyone except Agent Graves through an encrypted line. It's going to be uncomfortable, Jake warned. Boring, actually. Lots of waiting. But boring is safe. Boring sounds wonderful, Emma said with a shaky laugh. They returned to the diner to finalize arrangements. Agent Graves had already coordinated with Lieutenant Morrison to have Emma's daughter and mother transported to a federal facility separately. Safer to keep them apart until Vincent was in custody. Emma spoke to Sophie on a secure phone, explaining in the simplified language of children's lies that Mommy has to help the police with something important and that she'd see her soon. By midnight, Jake's Jeep was loaded with supplies, MREs, water, a trauma kit, ammunition for Jake's personal sidearm, and a satellite phone that couldn't be traced. Emma sat in the passenger seat, exhausted and numb. Titan claimed the back seat, alert despite the late hour. As they pulled out of the parking lot, Jake saw Agent Graves standing in the floodlights, phone to his ear, coordinating the manhunt for Vincent Vance. The FBI agent gave a single nod, acknowledgement, respect, trust. Jake returned it, then guided the Jeep onto the dark mountain road. In the rearview mirror, the lights of Millbrook Ridge faded into the distance. Ahead lay the mountains, the darkness, and a small cabin where a warrior and a witness would hold the line against the coming storm. Emma stared out the window at the shadowy tree line rushing past. "What happens if they find us?" she asked quietly. Jake's hands were steady on the wheel. "Then they'll learn what it costs to threaten someone under my protection." Titan's eyes gleamed in the darkness of the back seat. The war wasn't over. It was just changing location. The Cedar Creek cabin sat in absolute darkness, a black shape against the deeper black of the mountain forest. Jake had killed all the lights the moment they arrived, relying instead on the pale wash of moonlight filtering through the trees. He'd spent the first hour establishing a defensive perimeter, pressure sensors on the approach road, fishing lines strung between trees at ankle height, motion-activated cameras he'd requisitioned from Agent Graves positioned at strategic intervals. Emma sat in the corner of the main room, wrapped in a blanket, watching Jake move through his preparations with quiet efficiency. There was something almost meditative about his focus, the way he checked and rechecked every detail. Titan patrolled the perimeter outside, a shadow among shadows, his presence marked only by the occasional soft chuff as he cleared sectors. "How long have you done this?" Emma asked, breaking the silence. Jake was examining the satellite phone, ensuring the encrypted connection was stable. "Military service? 12 years. SEAL teams? 8? This specifically?" He gestured at the fortified cabin. "Every deployment involves some version of this. Establish a position, defend it, wait for extraction or mission completion." "Does it get easier?" Jake looked at her, saw the exhaustion etched into her face, the tremor in her hands she couldn't quite control. "No," he said honestly, "but you get better at functioning through it. Fear doesn't go away. You just learn to move with it instead of freezing." Before Emma could respond, the satellite phone buzzed. Jake answered immediately. "Reeves." Agent Graves's voice came through, crackling slightly. "Update. Vincent Vance is in the wind. We hit his primary residence 2 hours ago. Empty. Staff claims he left yesterday for a business trip. No destination given. We've got federal warrants out, airports flagged, borders notified. But Jake..." Graves paused. "He knows Moretti failed. That means he knows someone intervened. Small-town diner, military-aged male with a trained K-9. Your description is already circulating in his network." Jake's jaw tightened. "So we're not just protecting Emma, we're targets." "Correct. Vincent's smart enough to know that eliminating you eliminates his biggest tactical problem. You're a witness, you're trained, and you humiliated his operation. Men like Vincent can't let that stand." "Let him come," Jake said quietly. "I'm in a defensive position with sight lines and advance warning. He wants to try the mountain. He's welcome to it." 72 hours, Jake. We're close. State police have 3 of his lieutenants in custody. Someone will break. Just hold the line." "That's what I do," Jake said and disconnected. He walked to the window, peering through the blackout curtains at the moonlit forest. Titan was visible near the tree line, a darker shadow that suddenly froze, head swiveling toward the access road. Jake's entire body went still. He touched the radio clipped to his belt. "Titan, alert status. Hold position." Through the window, Jake saw Titan drop into a crouch, his body language shifting from patrol to hunt. The dog had detected something. Jake moved to the gun case he'd brought from his Jeep, pulling out his Sig Sauer P226 and press-checking the chamber. Round loaded. He grabbed the night vision monocular and moved to the door. "Emma, get in the bathroom, lock the door. Don't come out until I say." Emma's eyes went wide. "They're here?" "Maybe. Maybe just a deer. But I don't assume. Move, now." Emma scrambled to the small bathroom, closing the door. Jake heard the lock click. He slipped outside, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness, then raised the night vision monocular. The world turned green and grainy. 200 yards down the access road, 2 heat signatures, human-shaped, moving slowly, tactically, using the tree line as cover. Not hunters, not lost hikers. These were operators. Jake keyed the radio. "Titan, fall back to position Alpha. Guard." The Belgian Malinois melted back toward the cabin, taking up a position near the porch stairs where he could intercept any approach. Jake moved to the south corner of the cabin, using the structure as cover, and waited. The 2 men advanced. Through the night vision, Jake could see they were armed. rifles, likely suppressed, professional gear. They moved with the spacing and coordination of trained contractors. Vincent hadn't sent amateurs this time. They were 50 yards out when one of them triggered Jake's fishing line trap. The nearly invisible monofilament pulled taut, yanking a cluster of tin cans Jake had suspended from a tree branch. The sudden clatter shattered the forest silence. Both men froze, rifles snapping up, scanning for threats. Jake used their moment of disorientation. He stepped out from cover, his P226 extended in a perfect isosceles stance, and fired 2 rounds into the ground directly between the men. The shots boomed in the quiet, intentionally loud, warning shots. "Federal Protected Witness Site," Jake shouted, his voice carrying authority. "You're trespassing on an active FBI operation. Drop your weapons and lay face down or the next rounds are center mass." For a frozen moment, nobody moved. Then one of the men, the larger one, made his choice. He swung his rifle toward Jake's voice. Bad choice. Jake's training took over, muscle memory honed through thousands of repetitions. He adjusted his aim and fired once. The round caught the shooter in the shoulder, spinning him around and dropping him. Not a killing shot. Jake wasn't judge and jury, but a decisively incapacitating one. The second man broke and ran, crashing through the underbrush back toward the road. "Titan, pursue and detain," Jake commanded. The Belgian Malinois launched from his position like a missile, covering the distance in seconds. Jake heard the impact, 75 pounds of dog hitting a running man, followed by a scream and the sound of bodies hitting the forest floor. Jake advanced on the downed shooter, keeping his weapon trained. The man was clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers, his rifle lying 3 feet away. "Don't move," Jake ordered. He kicked the rifle further away, then checked the man for secondary weapons. He found 2, a Glock in an ankle holster and a knife strapped to his vest. In the distance, Titan had the second man pinned, growling steadily. The man was screaming, "Get it off me! Jesus Christ, get it off!" Jake zip-tied the wounded man's hands, then jogged to where Titan held the second contractor. "Titan, release, guard." The dog stepped back, but remained at alert, ready to re-engage. Jake secured the second man's hands as well, confiscated his weapons, and hauled both contractors to their feet. "Start talking," Jake said coldly. "Who sent you?" The wounded one spat blood. "You know who?" "Vincent Vance. What's his location?" "Like I'd tell you." Jake stepped closer. "You just attempted murder of a federal witness. That's life in prison. But cooperation with the FBI? That could reduce your sentence considerably. Or you can stay loyal to a man who sent you to die on a mountain and won't lift a finger to help you now. Your choice." The 2 men exchanged glances. The uninjured one broke first. "He's at the Riverside Lodge, 20 miles south. 3rd floor penthouse. He's got 8 more guys with him. This was supposed to be a soft probe, see if the witness was really here." "Well, now he knows," Jake said. He keyed the satellite phone. "Graves, I've got 2 hostiles in custody. Vincent's location is Riverside Lodge, 20 miles south of my position. You'll want to move fast." Graves's response was immediate and energized. "Outstanding. State Police SWAT is already mobilizing. I'm 15 minutes out for prisoner pickup. Hold what you got." Jake looked at the 2 contractors, bleeding and defeated in the moonlight. 15 minutes. Don't move. Don't talk. Don't even breathe hard. Titan sat between them in the cabin, a silent promise of what would happen if they tried. True to his word, Agent Graves arrived 14 minutes later with a convoy of federal and state vehicles. The quiet mountain road erupted with flashing lights and tactical teams securing the scene. EMTs treated the wounded contractor's shoulder while Lieutenant Morrison read both men their rights. Emma emerged from the bathroom, pale but unharmed. She stood on the porch, watching the organized chaos, still processing that 2 men had come to kill her and were now being loaded into police vehicles. Agent Graves approached Jake, who was sitting on the porch steps having his ribs re-examined by an EMT. "You're making this a habit, Sergeant." "Wasn't my plan," Jake said, wincing as the medic probed his side. "Vincent knows you're the protector now. He'll be even more motivated to eliminate you. The good news is we've got his location locked down. SWAT is breaching the Riverside Lodge in..." He checked his watch. 8 minutes. This ends tonight." Jake nodded. Emma needs to know it's over before she'll feel safe. Graves looked at Emma, who was standing with a blanket around her shoulders, looking small and lost. She's been through hell, but she's strong, stronger than she knows. 23 minutes later, Graves's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his face broke into a grim smile. "Vincent Vance is in custody," he announced. "SWAT breached the penthouse. He tried to run through a service entrance but ran straight into state police. It's over." Emma's knees buckled. Lieutenant Morrison caught her, guiding her to sit. "It's really over?" Emma whispered. "It's over," Graves confirmed. Vincent Vance, 6 of his lieutenants, and 4 corrupt officials, including Sheriff Crenshaw, are all in federal custody. The network is dismantled. You're safe." Emma looked at Jake, tears streaming down her face. "You saved my life. Twice." Jake was quiet for a moment. "I'm just a guy who couldn't stand by." "You're not just anything," Emma said fiercely. "You're a Navy SEAL. You're a hero. That dog," she looked at Titan, who sat at Jake's feet, "is a hero. You didn't have to help me, but you did. Why?" Jake met her eyes. "Because you did the right thing even when it was hard. Even when it was dangerous. People like you are why people like me do what we do. You're the reason the fight matters." Lieutenant Morrison stepped forward. "Ms. Lawson, we still recommend witness protection through the trial, but with Vincent in custody and his network collapsed, the immediate threat is neutralized. You'll testify, but you'll do it safely." Emma nodded, wiping her eyes. She walked to Jake and, without warning, wrapped her arms around him in a fierce hug. Jake stiffened. He wasn't good with physical contact, but after a moment he awkwardly patted her back. "Thank you," Emma whispered. "Thank you for giving me my life back." When she pulled away, she knelt down to Titan, burying her hands in his fur. The dog, who had been so fierce and lethal hours before, leaned into her touch, gentle as a lamb. "Good boy," Emma said, her voice breaking. "Such a good boy." The next 72 hours passed in a blur of debriefings, statements, and medical evaluations. Jake's cracked rib was confirmed via X-ray and wrapped properly. Titan was cleared by a veterinary board and officially commended for his service. Emma was reunited with Sophie and her mother at a federal facility. Their tears of relief witnessed by a room full of hardened agents who suddenly found reasons to look away. On the 4th day, Jake stood in Agent Graves's temporary field office in Millbrook Ridge. Graves pushed a folder across the desk. "Vincent Vance is looking at 60 years minimum. His nephew Marcus might get his sentence extended. Sheriff Crenshaw is cooperating fully. He'll serve time, but reduced. The 2 contractors you captured are already providing evidence against Vincent's broader operations. You didn't just save one life, Sergeant. You broke open a criminal enterprise that's been operating for 2 decades. Jake nodded, uncomfortable with the praise. Emma did the hard part. She testified when no one else would. True, but she wouldn't be alive to testify again without you. Graves leaned back. Your command called me. They're aware of what happened. They're impressed and concerned. Apparently, resiliency leave wasn't supposed to involve firefights. Jake almost smiled. No, it wasn't. They're extending your leave another month. Mandatory this time. No operations, no interventions, no heroics. Orders from your Master Chief. Make him rest, or I'll court-martial him myself. This time, Jake did smile. Sounds like Master Chief. There's one more thing. Graves pulled out another document. Emma Lawson wanted me to give you this. It was a letter, handwritten on diner stationery. Jake, I don't have words big enough to thank you. You gave me back my daughter, my mother, my future. You showed me that there are still people in the world who stand up when everyone else sits down. I'm taking Sophie to my sisters in Oregon while the trial preparations happen. It's not witness protection, just distance and family. I'm going to paint again. Really paint. I'm going to teach Sophie that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing the right thing even when you're terrified. I'm going to teach her about a soldier and his dog who saved her mother's life. You told me that protecting people like me gives the violence meaning. I want you to know you've given my testimony meaning. Vincent Vance will go to prison because you wouldn't let me die. That matters. You matter. Thank you for being my guardian when I needed one most. Emma P.S. Give Titan extra treats. He's earned them. Jake folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket. His chest felt tight, but for once it wasn't from the cracked rib. It was something else, something that felt almost like healing. 6 months later, Jake stood in the back of a federal courtroom watching Emma Lawson take the witness stand. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back, her spine straight. When the prosecutor asked her to identify the man who had ordered her death, Emma looked directly at Vincent Vance and pointed. That man, Vincent Vance. He sent a killer to murder me because I testified against his nephew. Vincent's face remained impassive, but his hands clenched on the defense table. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Luca Moretti's testimony, Sheriff Crenshaw's cooperation, the contractor's statements, Jake's intervention, the recorded phone calls and wire transfers. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Vincent Vance was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jake returned to Millbrook Ridge one final time before his leave ended. The Sunrise Diner had reopened under new management. Sam, the old cook, had bought it with money from a mysterious anonymous investor, Agent Graves, though he'd never admit it. Emma was there, visiting before her permanent move to Oregon. She saw Jake walk in with Titan, and her face lit up with genuine joy. "You came," she said, hugging him. "Couldn't leave without saying goodbye properly." They sat in the same corner booth where Jake had first intervened. Emma showed him photos on her phone. Sophie playing in her new school, paintings Emma had completed, vibrant, hopeful works that spoke of healing and second chances. "I'm opening a small gallery in Portland," Emma said. "Nothing fancy, but it's mine. Sophie's thriving. My mom," her voice caught, "she passed 3 weeks ago, peacefully. She got to know Sophie was safe. That's all she wanted." "I'm sorry," Jake said. "Don't be. She was ready, and she was so proud when I told her about you. She said, 'Angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they have dog tags." Emma smiled. She was right. Jake looked down at Titan, who was sleeping under the table, finally at peace. "He did most of the work." "You both did." Emma reached across the table and squeezed Jake's hand. "How are you?" "Really?" Jake considered the question. The nightmares hadn't stopped entirely, but they'd lessened. The guilt still lived in his chest, but it shared space now with something else. Purpose reaffirmed. "Better," he said honestly. "I'm heading back to my team next week. I think I'm ready." "You saved my life so you could go back to saving others," Emma said. "That's who you are. Don't lose that." They talked for another hour about everything and nothing. Two people whose lives had intersected violently, but had found something redemptive in the wreckage. When it was time to leave, Emma walked Jake to his Jeep. She knelt down to Titan one last time. "Take care of him," she told the dog. "He takes care of everyone else. Someone needs to take care of him." Titan's tail wagged, a solemn promise. Jake drove back up the mountain road one last time, Titan in the passenger seat, both of them watching the valley fall away below. The October air was crisp and clean, carrying the promise of winter but no longer the weight of dread. His phone buzzed. A text from Master Chief. "Welcome back, Reeves. Hope you got some rest. Briefing Monday, 0600. Don't be late." Jake smiled. Rest wasn't what he'd found, but he'd found something better, a reminder of why the fight mattered. He thought about Emma, about her courage to testify when the system had failed her, about Sophie, growing up knowing her mother had stood against evil, about the networks of corruption that had fallen because one waitress had refused to look away. Heroes weren't the people who wanted to fight. They were the people who fought because someone had to. Jake reached over and scratched Titan's ears. "We did good, buddy." Titan's eyes were warm and knowing. As the sun set over the Smoky Mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Jake Reeves, Navy SEAL, guardian, protector, drove toward whatever came next. The war wasn't over. It never was. But tonight, one battle had been won. And sometimes that was enough. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes still exist. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments. What was your favorite moment? Was it Titan's loyalty, Jake's protection, or the moment justice was served? We read every comment. God bless, and see you in the next story.